Welcome to the Ground and Pwn Podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. We hope you enjoyed last week's video game draft, but we are back with another timely episode, and we hope to focus largely on the UFC and a little bit of PFL, but we're also going to get some gaming chat in. But before we jump into the massive event that was UFC 277, Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing well. It's the first day back with my family is all here too, because we are all kind of spread out for the last week or so. They went to the beach, I went to Niagara Falls, and it's a little bit of a normalization process again, getting everybody under one roof.
I bet, yeah. It's and you're also coming off of the post pay-per-view hangover, which I think is a very real thing. I think that there's always this hype leading up to a big card, like was seen with UFC 277, and then we get to the fights, and this card, there was some certified bangers on it. There were some disappointments as well, but I think that the top two fights on this card definitely delivered. And but now we're kind of just in this period where we're like, all right, what now? And we do have a fight night card on the horizon. But before we get to that, let's talk about 277 and what were your overall impressions?
My overall impressions, honestly, were just the fact that it delivered in terms of where it mattered most. The two title fights, I think, were engaging throughout. No matter what you thought of that, there's almost this weird debate that came out of the Amanda Nunes victory. It was like, was it a competitive fight or was it a dominant fight? And it's like, doesn't matter. It was an entertaining fight, and the one woman who won the fight definitely won the fight. And it was almost like this, there's this debate to contextualize, well, how dominant was it or how competitive was it? I would frame it as it was a dominant victory that always felt like Pena was in the fight.
Absolutely. If you look at the scorecards, didn't we have a 50-44?
We had a 50-44, a 50-45, and a 50-43.
Oh, that's right.
The 50-43, maybe a little bit of a stretch.
The 44 is how I scored it.
Yeah, I think 44 is probably the best score. I had originally scored at 45, but that was based on sort of a flawed interpretation of how you would apply the Ds, the damage, dominance, and duration to trying to evaluate a 10-8 round in round two. Having spoken with some officials, they really helped me kind of point my North Star in the right direction, and I do feel much more confident that this is a definite 10-8 round.
Especially with 3 knockdowns in a single round,
Sure.
That's a lot to contend with when you're trying to reconcile giving a 10-9 in that round. Because from my perspective, if you believe that 10-8 should be a score, I think that's like the poster child for a 10-8 almost.
It's not exactly. No, I mean, I've seen a lot more dominant rounds, to be perfectly honest, but it was the way it comes down to when you're kind of, and I want to go into the weeds of it because I'm such a scoring nerd and everything, but the only thing I would point out is just that when you're really trying to figure out these, whether it's a 10-8 or not, you have to use the 3 Ds, which are damage, dominance, and duration. Mm-hmm. And you need to have at least 2 of those to consider it, and all 3 to definitely pull the trigger. Here, I think there's only 2, because duration would imply that there was an elongated period in which Nunes was kind of pounding on Pena, and that really wasn't the case, because every time she drops her, Pena's either right back in it, or she's able to defend, or Nunes just doesn't
let her up.
Really follow it. Exactly. So there's kind of that let her off the gas kind of thing, but we can definitely check off damage because she knocked her down 3 times hard. And dominance is kind of the idea of either outclassing them on the ground or on the feet. And she definitely outclassed Juliana Pena on the feet. So we've got 2 there. And then if one of those 2 is damage, which it is here, you're really supposed to pull the trigger. So that's kind of the thinking of a 10-8.
So here's the thing about that, though, is I heard Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan talking on the commentary of oh, she's afraid to go to the ground with Pena. And it's why would she go to the ground when she knocked her down 3 times in a round? That is she's already just showing that she is, at least in that round, head and shoulders above her on the feet. So it's why would she want to why would she want to change the dimensions of the fight in that particular moment,
It's a really good question. One that I still can't figure out, especially given the way the last 3 rounds went, where she took her down a bunch of times and then tried to engage her in the guard.
Hey, she was afraid to
did
grapple
exactly what Cormier was trying to think about, right?
But I mean, that was just, I will say that, like, I had my concerns about Amanda Nunes. I was thinking that she was going to win. And I thought maybe it was even going to be a knockout early on because, like, she came in here probably feeling like she had a lot to prove. She had to shake off the loss that was her first loss in forever. Like, what was her last loss? Kat Zingano?
It was. She has only lost 1 fight in the last 8 years.
Yeah, it's wild because, you know, everybody was picking Ronda Rousey over her, or a lot of people were. Because, like, that was the mainstream opinion, right? Like, she's going to come back and tear through her because that's what Ronda Rousey does.
That was definitely the mainstream opinion. That wasn't necessarily the educated opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I sat down at the Buffalo Wild Wings and I was watching the Nunes-Rousey fight and the waitress came by and she's like, who do you guys think? You guys are thinking Rousey's going to win this, right? And I was like, I don't think so. But, like, I think that, like, you know, it'd be cool to see her come back and take it, but I don't think that she's going to. And we saw exactly what happened. And we've seen exactly what happened with most of Amanda Nunes' opponents. So that's why the Juliana thing was such a big shock to the system. I don't think anybody was giving her a chance in that December fight. And then coming into this, I think people were still doubting Juliana's ability to strike twice in this regard. And, you know, we saw that she put up a great fight, but Amanda Nunes just came in a different kind of shape in this fight. You know, like, she looked lean. She looked strong. She was sharp. She came out southpaw. Like, this was like a different Amanda Nunes, which is scary to say because we have seen so many different looks of hers and so many dominant looks of hers. And to get this on top of all of those is just, like, wild. Like, how much more could she evolve from this point?
You know, the fact that she did go heavy with the southpaw here and made it work really well. And I think she even called it a work in progress to some effect after the fights, after she was talking with media and everything like that. And I think that's probably a fair assessment. But either way, I mean, she's so far ahead of Juliana Pena in terms of her actual striking skill. You know, that's what almost makes the first fight just seem so. And I will not actually call this a fluke win, but something about it is just so bizarre because that's not really the way. Not only the fight would go most of the time, but that particular type of fight would go most of the time. More often than not, we're going to see rounds upon rounds, if it's just striking, of what we saw, I think, on Saturday than what we saw 8 months ago. And really, if you go back to that first fight, I don't want to dwell on that when we have a more recent fight to talk about, but if you go back to that first fight, Amanda Nunes looked pretty darn good in that first round. It's really, there's like this 2.5 minute blip, maybe more, where Nunes just the cart goes off the track and she just can't get it back. If you take that whole section out of it, we have a Juliana Pena who is competitive, who is always in the fight, but really not winning the fight. And that, I think, it just speaks to the fact that, look, as much as it was a legitimate victory, absolutely, I have no hunger for the trilogy fight right now because I know how that one's going to go. They want to try it again down the road a little bit, okay. But if they somehow think that, yeah, let's do the trilogy now, it's going to go a lot similar to this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good fight. It was the scorecards. What I was getting to with the scorecards earlier was, like, if you look at the scorecards without seeing any moments of the fight, you would say, oh, this was a blowout. Nunes just ran through her. This was a competitive fight, even as Nunes was steadily winning every minute of the fight. The only time that she was really in any peril, Juliana caught her a couple of times. It seemed like it kind of stung Amanda, or buckled her legs a little bit. But, like, it wasn't any imminent danger in that regard. It was just like, oh, wow, she landed a really clean, like, counter strike on Amanda. Or when she had that arm bar, that looked like it could have gotten kind of close. The triangle attempts, I don't think she got particularly close, at least not as close as the commentary seemed to think. But, like, the arm bar, I was like, uh-oh, this might be a little bit of a problem. Like, and Juliana,
it was definitely a problem. It was a threat, but obviously not one enough that any of the judges or probably us sitting at home really realized it was like, oh yeah, that's enough to even take the round away. Amanda was definitely winning every round, no question. She's just it was competitive. That's all it really was. The question I would have for you, sir, is, and we don't have to go through every single fight or anything like that, but at the top of your head, where do you think this might rank in terms of Amanda Nunes' victories, like as far as most impressive? It's probably not the most impressive because, oh my goodness, I mean, we've seen her just look like a house on fire and just maul through some fighters. But where do you think this ranks?
I mean, I would say honestly, her most impressive victory was Chris Cyborg. So
Okay.
because I just remember like blew the roof off the place, and then we got, what was it, Jones Gustafson too, and it was like, that's kind of a bummer. I think that's what it was the co-main event too, was Jones Gustafson too. Yeah, it was. So I'm looking at her Tapology page right now. I would say this is more impressive than any other title defense she has had at bantamweight.
Okay.
The only one I would say is maybe on par with this in terms of bantamweight title defenses would be Holly Holm, because she just kicked her head off. And that's the thing that Holly Holm was known for doing back in the day. So to have Amanda turn the tables on her and pull that off on top of her, that was impressive. Her featherweight title defenses, I think, are all extremely impressive. Taking down Felicia Spencer, Megan Anderson in the methodical way that she did. But this showed a level of grit that we haven't had to see come out of Amanda, even in a dominant victory. She had to fight for this every single round. It was Juliana did not go away until that final bell rang.
I think, and to top on that, to kind of enhance your point, I think is the fact, the grit. She had to come back from the loss here. It was there's the context of that, which I think really does add to it. And I think that's what makes this a very impressive victory. I would suggest that actually I think her most impressive victory on the whole was over Miesha Tate, because I mean she made Miesha Tate, who came in obviously off of that big win over Holly Holm. And granted, that was a comeback victory on its own, but she took that belt and she just played with her for basically 3 minutes. And it wasn't just like one strike or anything like that. It was like, man, this woman, when she walked in the cage, you kind of already got the sense that, I'm not projecting some sort of like fear that Miesha Tate had or anything like that, but you just got the sense like, oh, this could get pretty bad pretty quickly once we really start going. And honestly, the Ronda Rousey fight the same way, but that one lasted, what was it? It was 48
less than
seconds
a minute.
Yeah,
48.
So there's another one too. But yeah, I mean, there's some really impressive ones. But I think the thing that impresses me, and that's why maybe I'll put this in like the top 3 somewhere, is the fact that all you said with kind of the grit going through a fight where a challenger is really kind of giving it to her, not a challenger, but a challenge in front of her is giving her a fight all the way to the end. And also the context of she had to overcome kind of that mental hurdle of coming back from a loss.
Yeah, and I would say the Miesha Tate and the Ronda Rousey defense, or the Miesha Tate win and the Ronda Rousey defense, were impressive in different ways. That was almost like, oh my God, there's a force atop this division. Whereas this was like, we knew who Amanda Nunes was. She's the greatest female fighter of all time, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and one of the most dominant champions we've ever seen in the UFC. To lose her belt and come back and display the kind of like just completely different form than what we saw 7 or 8 months ago, and deal with a champion in this regard, not a challenger, but a champion that she was going up against that had just beaten her, and showed that she is not going to go away. She can take whatever Amanda's going to throw at her, and she's going to get right back up and get right back in her face. And even when she's being ground and pounded, she's going to throw up submission attempts, even though a lot of them didn't even threaten Amanda. It gave her pause. This was her going through the fire and still coming out as a dominant victor. And that's why it's so impressive. It's impressive in ways that Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey didn't even give her a chance to be impressive, because, she was able to get rid of them within a round.
Well, she found a way to be impressive in those fights in a different
No, it's impressive in different ways is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think this fight that we just had against Pena is a legacy enhancer, is really what it is. It shows that it's not easy to come back and win that belt, especially, sometimes we see a champion who's kind of, let's say, newer to the scene get knocked off, and then they have to fight their way back, and they were able to like reclaim that belt, right? We've seen it. Rose Namajunas is a good case for it. George St. Pierre. These are fighters who they had kind of just won the belt, but they didn't really get the chance to, defend that belt against, let's say, a new opponent or really start to stamp down that division as theirs. And they were able to come back and get to that point. This is someone who had ruled for a very long time, and she had lost it. And in theory, one has another belt. Still could kind of just be like, well, I have that. No, she's not. She comes back and she's okay. I want to get this back, and she's able to get this back. And I think that speaks to a certain level of determination that is very rare in this sport, even for fighters who have been around a long time. So it's a really, really big win, and she's just raising the bar for I guess women's MMA, women's fighters who are coming into the sport or coming up in the sport, or just watching the sport right now and maybe want to do it one day. She's raising the bar very, very, very high in so many different ways. And between her and Chris Cyborg, I think they've just set an amazing standard.
So let me ask you this question to reframe which one is more impressive in the kind of the context of another legendary 2-fight series in the women's UFC divisions. What is the more impressive Zhang Weili fight? Is it her first win over Joanna, or her second win over Joanna?
The second was much more impressive. I mean, she went out, and it wasn't just that like she flash knocked her out or anything like that. Like, she was definitely dominant in that fight, and that's why it's much more impressive to me.
I would say it's more impressive, but I mean that first win is not far behind, just because of how much of a war that first one was. And again, went through the fire, came out the other side the victor.
It's one of my favorite fights of all time, but I think we're asking two different things. So that's why I kind of lean toward the second one. I think we've got other stuff we got to be talking about here, sir. We've got quite a bit on our plate today. We've got to catch up. So why don't we move on to the interim flyweight title fight, which was, of course, won by Brandon Moreno, setting up the tetralogy with Davis Figueiredo. And I think you'd mentioned to me before we got on here, you weren't able to watch the entire fight. You kind of missed the first round.
Yeah, I came in, I guess, just before the halfway point of this particular fight. So
sure, and we've so much to cover. We can't really go deep into the weeds with this fight as much as we would probably like to. But obviously, it sets up a bigger fight down the road. An impressive win. Anytime you get a liver shot knockout, you're just like, oh, that's kind of fun.
Just watching a fighter as talented and as just tough as Kai Kara-France just crumble from a liver shot, that just shut his body down.
So I was at the Association of Boxing Commission's annual conference last week, which is why we did a sort of an unorthodox, pre-recorded, news focused show. But while I was there was a presentation from one of the ringside doctors. I believe it's the one from the Mohegan Commission. And he was going through the science of liver shots, of shots to the solar plexus, body shots and that kind of deal. And the way it works is there's basically just a nerve disruption. And that explains the reason why when you see the liver shot, there's the delay. Mm-hmm. And it explains also why once you're shot to the liver like that, fighters do not come back. Their body just shuts down. So it doesn't matter how tough you are or whatever. That organ is not meant to take that kind of impact. Anybody's going to go down, no matter how tough you are. And when that happens, pretty much there's no reason for the referee to let it go as long as the referee has correctly identified that as a liver shot, which they ought to be able to. Really, you just kind of wave it off. Don't let them take unnecessary punches. There was one example given of a fighter who had come back from a liver shot that they had seen in, let's say, decades, like going back like maybe 3 decades. And that was in a boxing match where you get a 10 count, and it was Arturo Gatti, who was built different, guys. And it was boxing. In MMA, it was explained to me that in MMA, it really should be impossible to come back from that because the fight should be stopped.
God, yeah. And like we've seen, I still have vivid memories of Edson Barbosa and like Giga Chikadze, just these incredible kickers, just completely obliterating legends. Like Cub Swanson was one of the victims of Giga, right? where
I
he
believe
just
so.
got he
Yeah,
got his liver kicked
that
in.
was the
like,
Giga
just-
kick.
Oh my god, like that just looks like it makes you cringe every time you see it. You're just like, oh my god, just watching like these guys just fall in like a way that they just can't control their body anymore is just horrific. Like it's a different kind of like wince that you do than like a flash knockout to the head.
Exactly. And again, that's why the fights really ought to be waved off in those scenarios.
But watching Brandon Moreno come in with a different camp behind him into this fight and execute such a great game plan against Kai Kara-France, like you have to like James Krause is just such a talented trainer and coach. Like it's amazing what he did with Brandon Moreno in just one fight. I mean, he had an amazing starting point, right? Like, but like still, James Krause it's just a great mind for this sport.
I don't mean to diminish James Krause as a mind in the sport. I think you hit the nail on the head as far as his actual acumen, but again, I would actually focus more on kind of what you said in there as well as the fact that he had something really great to work with. I mean, there's a lot of
former champion.
There are a lot of people who actually think that Brandon Moreno won the last fight over Davis Figueiredo. I'm not one of them, but you can get there on the cards. It's not that crazy to get there. So when you're talking about that, it's like, okay, it's almost like you went against, and this is no disrespect to Kai Kara-France. I think he's a talented flyweight, but I think now we're seeing that this is someone who maybe just is not going to be able to get over the hump unless, maybe some significant upgrades come along. He's been in the sport a long time already as it is. He turned pro like when he was 17. I think he's 31 now or something like that. So I just don't know how much more he's going to be able to evolve. But the fact of the matter is that obviously he went out, he looked impressive, and he was losing that round before he got the liver kick to win it here. But
well, that's the thing is, like, I don't think he has that far, Kai Kara-France does, to get back to the title contention. I mean, there's a great pool of fighters at flyweight, but at the same time, he has some really strong wins, and he was showing that he could beat Brandon Moreno as long as he doesn't absorb a devastating liver kick.
No, it's true, but also, there's the pool of flyweight talent who are in the championship picture, and pretty much that championship picture is just Figueiredo and Moreno.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, how many times are we going to run this one back, right? But
one more.
yeah, well, at least one more. And I guess the question I would have for you, and I was hoping to ask this, but I know you had mentioned you were not able to watch Alexandre Pantoja's amazing victory over Alex Perez, and that was a fantastic finish. I would have asked you, hey, what's more impressive? Who looked more impressive? Was it Moreno or was it Pantoja?
I mean, I think that Moreno faced the tougher competition.
Yes,
but
that's easy. I mean, that's no question.
Just looking at the the results. I mean, Pantoja submitting him in a minute and a half is extremely impressive.
And because you didn't watch it, I'll give you some more context for what it really was. I mean, this was a fight where just immediately he kind of comes out like a house of fire. He's able to quickly get to the back. And he's working first thing he's looking for this choke like higher up. It's almost like over his eyes. And then like ever so slowly, because you say to yourself, oh, he's not going to finish that position from there. Although in theory, if you twist the neck enough, you really can. But slowly he gets lower and lower and lower and closer to the neck. And he doesn't really get it over the neck. It's still over the jaw and the mouth and everything like that. But think about how much he was able to crank to finish a championship challenger level UFC fighter with that kind of crank and not even actually be compressing the carotid and turning off the brain. That's an amazing win, and he really looked special in there. And this is somebody who has beaten the best in the world at this weight class, man. I mean, we're talking about somebody who has it really, if he doesn't lose the fight to Askar Askarov a few years ago, there's no reason he couldn't beat Brandon Moreno a second time. I think he was referring to him and Kai Kara-France as his sons. That was a what? It's kind of a lame one, but it's also like, what? He has that. He's got 3 wins combined over the 2 guys that were in the title fight. So yeah, he's really impressive, and I think he really deserves his shot sooner than later. It's unfortunate it's been tied up, but he'll get there.
It seemed like right after Moreno won the title off of Figgy that Pantoja had I forget who he beat, but he had a big win. and he was like, I think Moreno was on the Spanish broadcast at like cage side, and he was like, "Hey, I would love a shot at that title next." And like Moreno looked like he was game, but then the UFC was like, "Well, we're doing Figueiredo again."
Well, I guess you're probably talking about the Brandon Royval victory. Is that what you want? Yeah. Brandon Royval, by the way, is just so much fun. He's probably my favorite flyweight to watch because he just always brings it, and he's always just a madman in there. But yeah, so I to answer, I guess, the question I posed, I think that actually, on the whole, Pantoja looked more impressive. But you're right. I mean, someone beat the higher caliber of opponent. So,
but also Moreno was losing parts of that fight definitively.
Yeah, I mean, he was. It was really just that round. I think the first two rounds, the majority of people tended to think that Moreno was up, even if not by a wide margin. He was up in those first two rounds. Actually, all three judges had completely different cards over those first two rounds. One judge had both for Moreno, one had both for Kara France, and then one had it split. And I don't think that's crazy. A lot of people thought it was crazy.
But it doesn't seem like Pantoja was losing even a second of this fight.
No, not at all. Not even a little bit. It was just him going in and just, surgically destroying Alex Perez.
It goes back to the Nunes question. Which win is more impressive? A one where she just walks through her opponent or one where she fights through the fire?
Yeah, I guess, obviously there's not one answer. There's no one size fits all, but it is what it is. So we can't dwell. We've already talked a lot about this card. I don't want to just walk away from it now, but let's kind of ask our requisite questions we tend to ask when we're coming off of pay-per-views, which is who else impressed you on Saturday?
I really enjoyed Negumeriano Nicolai's victory over Ihor Potieria. I don't know how to pronounce it.
It's Potieria, I believe.
Potieria. And, once that started going downhill in that second round, and he got him up against the cage and was just unloading on him, that was another one of those ones where I was wincing, but for a completely different reason. He was just laying into Potieria. And once he started landing the knees, like in the clinch, I was like, oh my God, this is like taking years off his life, the way he's just like unloading into him. And I thought that was incredibly impressive. He just demolished him in that second round. And I thought that was the most impressive of the fights I saw. I thought Jocelyn Edwards looked really good as well.
I wasn't engaged in that fight. It was. I've actually had to watch that a couple times because there was some rounds in there. We talked about it in my judging show, but there's a lot of, when you watch a lot of Jocelyn Edwards fights, they feel a lot like sparring sessions.
Because she keeps her opponents at distance. Because
but she's also not like
kicks.
She's really not hurting them to a high degree either.
That's fair.
They never feel like they're in grave danger. And hey, look, she's working her way up the rankings. Maybe this is a good way to kind of just keep people at bay, and maybe she's just that good and she's able to do that. But the one thing I will say, again, because we think about judging on my other podcast, whenever I see Jocelyn Edwards on there, I'm like, I know we're going to talk about some of these rounds because they're always kind of close. So
I will say that I'm actually bummed that my boy Matt Semmelsberger wasn't able to pull off the victory here because little known fact, he's from my hometown.
Oh,
yeah, I went to school with his sister.
Oh,
yeah. So I'm always rooting for Matt Semmelsberger.
That's interesting. Are they good people? Are they terrible people? What do they do?
I mean, they seem pretty good. I wasn't like close with her or anything like that. I think she was a grade younger than me.
Okay.
But like, I never knew Matt, unfortunately. But I always root for the Frederick, Maryland guy.
There you go. For me, honestly, the most impressive performance that we had this, let's say on the undercard, on the prelims, Micah Morales. What really impressed me about him is just there's a clear level of, I'm just better than these guys, and yeah, you almost get the sense he not coasted, but he could have turned it up early, and yet he still found the way to finish it in the third round. His power carried through, and that's something that you really want to be able to see from a young guy, that he doesn't just have it early and then it disappears and he doesn't know what to do. This was a tough fight that Adam Fugate was able to put him through, and he ended up, again, third round finish, nice finish. We like to see that kind of thing from a young guy, so that was good.
Yeah, and I also am glad that Drew Dober was able to get speaking of body KOs,
Oh yeah,
he was able to get his finish. I think Drew Dober does have a promising future in this division. It's just like, look at the two fighters that he lost to recently, Brad Riddell and Islam Makhachev. It's like anybody could lose to both of those fighters on any given night.
Well, how much future does he have left? He's been in the UFC 9 years, sir.
I mean, and his only losses, he lost to OAM, when is that, 2016. Other than that, he's lost to Beneil Dariush. And it's like, God, this guy, and then other than that, 2014, 2013, those were his last losses. But I think that he's
very impressive. I wonder about how much further he's really going to be able to go, because again, it's been a very long. He's not that old, realistically, but it's the miles, man. He's put a lot of miles on. He's had some really tough fights. I mean, there was that war that he had earlier this year with Terrence McKinney, one of those round of the year contenders. So yeah, I don't know how much farther he's going to go, but I think he's going to be an enjoyable part of this division in kind of this range of the rankings for still a good amount of time longer.
I think as a few more years that if he strings together a good run, he could see himself at least in that mid rankings range of fights.
Yeah, hard to say. I guess I don't subscribe to that personally, but it could be, certainly.
It's a stacked division though. I'll give you that. It's breaking into that top 15 is no easy task.
Now, the other question that we always ask is, how did this event compare to your expectations for it? Now, we didn't get to talk about our expectations for it, but coming into this pay-per-view, were you expecting kind of like a big event, or were you looking at it as kind of top-heavy? Were you not sure if this was kind of one of those, I feel really awesome about dropping $75 down, or what?
It's funny because when you go into an Amanda Nunes headlined pay-per-view, we are so conditioned to be like, she's going to run through her. So you almost had to retrain your brain to be like, wait a sec, she lost to this person a few months ago. So that's actually an important fight. So originally I was just like, it's Amanda Nunes headlined pay-per-view. Sure, it's always fun to see the GOAT do what she does. And then I was like, no, this is Juliana. This is a rematch of a fight that she just recently lost. And then, of course, I love Brandon Moreno. He's one of my favorite fighters. I want to be friends with Brandon Moreno every single time he talks.
I just want to make Legos with him.
I want to play. I want to play video games. I want to make Legos. I want to talk about Zelda with him. He's just a delightful human being, and I am so glad that he has UFC gold, even if it's just interim gold right now. But I'm so glad he has UFC gold once again.
Now, an idea I just had. Now, I really would like to interview him. Maybe over the course of an hour or two while we're also building a Lego set together.
Dude, that would be the best.
That'd be fascinating.
I love interviews while you're doing stuff that the interview subject loves.
Yeah. I have a dream, by the way, that I would love to interview George St. Pierre while walking around a dinosaur museum.
God, yes, make that happen.
I'm honestly, I've been plotting it a long time. I need to figure out the right way to do this, but yeah.
Well, it's either that or fighting or women, right? No. Those are the three things that excite him. So that's the safest one.
Sir, I don't believe fighting women is appropriate for a man.
I'm not saying fighting women. Those are the three things he said that excite him. The violence of the octagon, women, of course, and dinosaurs.
Well, I am not going to be fighting. My days of fighting are long past, if they ever really existed. And I'm kind of settled down here with a wife of almost 9 years. So yeah, it's got to be dinosaurs. It has to be dinosaurs. It is. Honestly, I'm almost a little way more excited to do that than anything else.
So, all right. So we're looking at the rest. We're just talking the main card, right? Because you're how
yeah. We're talking about the pay-per-view portion that you had to pay for to get into.
I wasn't particularly thrilled about the booking of Lewis and Pavlovich, but still somehow it did not meet expectations because of the terrible stoppage. I think that not terrible. I'll say it was an early stoppage, but it wasn't. It was justified, honestly.
I think it's actually a reasonably fine stoppage, and I would push back on that. And another thing that kind of actually bothered me about the context of people talking about it, and it was more because of what Rogan said here in particular. Joe Rogan made the comparison to Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard. It's like, how many times do we see him knocked down and he's able to come back? And I'm like,
that's tough with a heavyweight.
That was 110 pounds lower.
Yeah.
There's a lot less menace coming on the punches from Gray Maynard, and that's not even a slight to Gray Maynard. I think he would tell you he doesn't hit as hard as Sergey Pavlovich, or never did.
I would say like I'll take back the terrible part because I do think it was justified, even if I don't agree with it. I think that if there's a spectrum of like, all right, right in the middle of the spectrum is a perfect stoppage, and then there's like another line that's like, this is early but acceptable, and then way too early, and then on the other side it's late but acceptable or way too late. I think this was near the early but acceptable threshold. I think that any earlier would have been way too early, and any later would have been better. But I think that it was still early.
Would you agree that Derek Lewis face planted in this fight?
He went down. Yes, in the moment it did look very bad, but think
that's the thing. Once the face plant happens, I mean, realistically, that's not how human bodies behave, and that's when a referee is going to stop it, even if they think they'll come back from it. Any sort of weird, because I also did the referee training when I went to this thing, right? Mm-hmm. When I went to the conference, any sort of weird, unorthodox movement of the body like that, where that's not a normal reaction. Referees are starting to really heavily scrutinize that. And if he lands on his face, I mean, shoot, that's no matter how much he bounces back, you can stop it right there. And realistically, I'm okay with it because I understand the theory.
I think that's why I'm okay with it and like have it be like a justified stoppage. However, I still would have liked to see Miragliotta give him a little bit more time to work just to see if he could get out of it.
I've seen too many times where Dan Miragliotta is allowing fights to go on that really ought not to, and that includes at the amateur level, which is also really scary when that happens.
Dangerous.
So, and I don't want to say that Dan Miragliotta is a bad referee, but there's a lot of practices in there that don't seem to jive with what we were taught. I mean, shoot, during the Matthew Semmelsberger fight, do you remember when Dan has to put back in Semmelsberger's mouthpiece?
Mm-hmm.
We were taught specifically, do not put the mouthpiece in the fighter's mouth. Let them do it.
Really? Why is that?
That was specific teaching.
Is it a germ thing?
It's not even that. It's really more about like what happens if something goes wrong. You put it in wrong, you get hurt, then you're liable and all that kind of thing. You've got to allow the fighter to do that on their own.
That makes sense.
So that's protocol. That's what is taught. And he ain't doing that. So.
That reminds me of when I was an RA in college and we would be like directing people, oh yeah, move your stuff in over here. Like when all the freshmen are moving into their dorms, we were told explicitly, do not help them carry furniture because one, if you damage their furniture, the university is suddenly liable for it. And two, if you get hurt, we're not paying for your injuries. Like if you like throw out your back trying to carry like a bed upstairs or a couch, like we're not paying for that. So like I get that from like that perspective. Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it's just the fact that like, and whether you agree with it or not, it's still what they're taught to do.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of the funny part about it. But you know what? We could go on and on about minutia like this, right? We got to kind of move on, don't we?
All I want to say
other stuff we want to talk about
is what was your main takeaway from Ankalaev Smith?
That Anthony Smith probably fought much too long on a broken ankle or whatever the heck he was. That's pretty much it.
But he's still, I mean, we didn't learn anything in this regard because we knew this already. But Anthony Smith is just a tough mofo.
Oh, yeah. He needs to be protected from himself much more than the people around him seem willing to do.
Well, you heard what he said, right? Where, like, if any of his trainers throw in the towel, he's going to fire them on the spot. That's an agreement. That's what he told them.
And that's fine. But, like, go elsewhere then.
Yeah, that's the problem.
If I was a trainer, and I would say, listen, if you don't trust me enough, you probably shouldn't be here anyway.
Yeah,
I think that's the counter to that. That's what that
was an interview that he had coming off the Glover Teixeira fight, where people were saying, "Oh, what were his trainers doing? What were his trainers doing? They should have thrown in the towel long before." Like when he's handing his teeth to Jason Herzog, and it's like, yeah, like. But I told my trainers, if you throw in the towel, we're done, basically. And I'm just like, damn, dude. Like, I get it. Like, you're a warrior. You're one of the toughest people I've ever heard of in existence. But come on.
No, you need to have trust in the people in your corner. And if they're looking out for you to be able to stop that fight or not. Because, shoot, we see it all the time in boxing. Fighters, sometimes their corners just stop the fight. It's an honorable thing to do. It's really okay. And the goal is really to look out for their future prospects, whether it be competitively or personally in life long after fighting is going on. I mean, do you really want to be a trainer who said, well, he told me not to intervene, but then I looked later on and it's like, man, he took a life-altering beating in there. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't want that on my head. And
no, never.
I don't think that's, I don't think that's fair for the fighter to put on the coach. And like I said, if he says, "Oh, I'm going to fire you guys," I'd be like, "Listen, that's what you got to do. You got to do, but I'm going to look out for you."
Now, looking at Ankalaev, since we've already talked about Smith in that fight, do you think this fight or this performance was impressive enough to get him in the title picture? It looks like we might do Yuri Glover again, but like, do you think that this was enough to get Ankalaev that next light heavyweight title shot?
He's in the picture, but no, definitely not. This wasn't a particularly engaging fight in any way.
It's better than Thiago Santos.
It was a good named win, but I don't know. Just no. I mean, unequivocal no. I think what we're looking at here is we've got the rematch that's probably on tap between Glover and the champion Yuri. And then waiting in the wings to some degree is Jan Blachowicz, whether he just gets the next shot or he takes another fight, maybe against Magomed Ankalaev, or somebody like that. Who knows how long it takes for Rakic to get back in, if he's back in the mix. There's this fight this weekend that we're about to talk about, and Thiago Santos and Jamal Hill. I think especially if Jamal Hill wins that, he starts to get in the mix because unless he doesn't look impressive here, he looks impressive every time he wins. And he's the type of fighter that I think the UFC likes to be able to get to that title shot because they know they can sell it with highlight packages. He's got an engaging personality. He's young.
Yeah, he's relatively new blood.
You know, I think there's a lot. I see star potential in Jamal Hill. I have for quite a while, and not just competitively, but outside of it. I think he's the type that can really garner some interest. So I think that if given the chance, it's much easier to say, hey, let's give him the shot rather than, this guy from Dagestan who realistically has not put on engaging fights. They've been lopsided fights. They've been clear victories, but they're not the most. No one's sitting there being like, man, I can't wait to watch Magomed Ankalaev here. It's just that doesn't really come to mind with this guy, and they need more than that. When they're trying to get this division back up. And there is a lot of talent here, and I don't deny the talent, but no, I just don't think I think he's probably going to have to beat a Jan Blachowicz and make it undeniable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, moving it forward to next weekend's card, because you mentioned two light heavyweight contenders that are in the conversation. Jamal Hill, if he wins, more so than Thiago Santos, because Thiago Santos is coming off a bit of a stretch here where people are just not excited to see this former, like, just absolute demolisher go out and fight anymore, because he's had, 3 kind of uneventful fights in a row here?
We're starting to get farther away from what we remembered best about him, and part of that, too, is you got to wonder how much did destroying both of his knees against John Jones kind of play a factor into that. I mean, it's very realistic that he's lost some explosiveness in his striking and his athletic ability because he had double knee surgeries. I believe
at the same time,
both of them. Yeah,
he took it to Glover in that first round. Like, he was destroying Glover, and Glover just weathered the storm and then took him down. But
that's very Glover, isn't it?
It is, but at the same time, it showed that he still had that experience. And even Glover after that fight was like, I understand why your nickname's Sledgehammer, because man, you hit. He basically was like, I've never been hit as hard as that guy. Like,
sure. No, the power is undeniable, but can he get it reliably enough at this level? And I think that's the question here. I don't want to say I'm trying to make a pick here, but look, you can kind of get a feel for where I lean as far as the talent on display here, and kind of the trajectories of these guys' careers. It's been 3 years since Thiago Santos fought John Jones, and look, there's a lot of people who think that he beat John Jones. I watched that fight again in the last year or so. I've challenged you to watch that fight again with fresh eyes, knowing that the way things go and kind of having a different expectation of what you could get from Thiago Santos. Watch that fight and say that he really beat John Jones. It's kind of hard to, in my opinion.
But he still came close on 0 knees.
Sure. And that, I feel like, speaks more to what the heck John Jones is doing right now. Like, why he's fighting with this weird fight IQ the last few times out. Now, John Jones is basically a retired fighter. I don't want to go deep into him because he hasn't fought in 2.5 years. And who knows if he'll fight again this year. So that's not really what it is. To get back to Santos and Hill, I think this is going to be a fun fight. I don't think we're going to get 5 rounds of this. I think this is one that I never expect multiple rounds, or I mean multiple, but I never expect it to go deep into the fight whenever it's Jamal Hill on the card. He tends to apply offense liberally on his opponents, and I think we're going to get a really exciting finish to
Now,
this card.
Jamal Hill was the one that gave Johnny Walker that really weird knockout where like he punched Johnny Walker and Walker kind of sprung up like a jack-in-the-box after he got knocked out, right? Was that Jamal Hill?
I don't recall it off the top of my head with that description, but I mean, he did definitely have a really solid win over Johnny Walker. Yeah.
I think that was the one where he landed the overhand right, and Johnny Walker, like, it looked like he was playing around, like, you know, as Johnny Walker sometimes does, but he was actually like unconscious when like it happened. Like he like it's like his body tried to like stand upright, and instead it like he sprung up in like backwards in a weird way.
It sounds right, but February seems so long ago at this point, and I haven't gotten the chance to dive deep into this one yet. So yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, as far as we like to rate these, right? We like to give our ratings on the main event.
Yeah.
How would you rate this fight night main event on our 5-star scale for your interest?
3?
Really?
Maybe a 2.5, but I think I'm leaning 3.
Ooh, I'm much higher than you. This is usually we're in some sort of rough range or even totally in line. Well, I think this is a solid 4.
Really?
Yeah, I really like this one.
I mean, I like it for the potential, but Thiago Santos just hasn't shown the exciting capabilities lately, right? Like, none of his fights recently have been entertaining. I mean, Magomed Ankalaev was a snoozer, which, you know, that might be just as much to blame to Ankalaev.
I feel like it's more about Ankalaev. I think there's something about the way he matches up with a lot of guys that unless he gets that very quick finish, his fights are just not that engaging. And I don't feel that way about Jamal Hill. Styles make fights, man. They say it all the time. It's old adage, but it makes sense, you know.
We could say the same thing about Johnny Walker, because Johnny Walker's been fighting in this weird, like, conservative manner lately as well.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you take those take the opponents out of it and just factor in how's it going to go against this opponent, that's why I'm more excited. It has less to do with Santos and more to do with what Jamal Hill can bring out of Santos.
Now, what about the Alexander Rakic fight?
What's that?
What about the Alexander Rakic fight? I don't remember that one being particularly thrilling either.
Alexander Rakic is another guy who he doesn't really produce a whole lot of. There's been like this lull at 205 pounds with a lot of these like upper contenders just not being all that interesting, or leading to a lot of interesting fights unless it ends in like, you know, no time flat like we were seeing from Johnny Walker for a while anyway.
All I'm saying,
now we're starting to get that new blood in there, like with Yuri Prohaska, with Jamal Hill. I think there's a new wave of interesting 205-pound fighters, and I like where the division's going.
All I'm saying is there's one common denominator there, and it's Thiago Santos. And no, trust me, when he was going into the John Jones fight, I was like, this might be the most exciting guy in the division. Like, Thiago Santos was must-see TV. Even coming off of those, like the Rakic and the Johnny Walker fights, I was still like, Ankalaev, that's must-see TV. And he let me down once again for the third time in a row. So while I think Jamal Hill is an amazing fighter, and I think he's a very exciting fighter, I have concerns that he's going to come in there trepidatious like a lot of these fighters do, right? Against the power of Thiago Santos, where it's just like, oh, I don't want to engage and get into a firefight with this guy because he'll knock my head off. And if that happens, I mean, this has the potential of a 4.5, but because of those concerns, I'm sticking with a 3.
Let me give you something about Jamal Hill, though. And think about this. When he fought against Paul Craig, what was the one way everyone thought that he was going to lose? Was if it went to the ground and he engaged in submissions. And you know what does Jamal Hill do once it goes to the ground? He stays there by choice and engages down there, and then he gets his arm broken. But this is someone who is, I don't think he's programmed to be cautious in terms of challenges like that. I think he looks at it and he, like when he's playing the game of chicken, he's not the one who turns away.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's how I see it, and that's why I'm much more excited. We'll see how it goes, of course. I mean, we could go on and on. We're obviously on different ends of the spectrum here, and one way. This will go one way this weekend. I'm obviously hopeful it'll go my way. I think you'd be.
I'm hopeful it'll go your way too.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. But the rest of the card here, there's obviously, you know, some interesting fights here, especially for people who watched The Ultimate Fighter, which I did not. Did you watch The Ultimate Fighter? Yeah. No. So I don't have a very strong opinion about that, which is part of the reason why I might actually start dinging this card in terms of my interest level on the underneath the main event. Why don't you give your star rating first? What do you assign to the rest of the card outside of the main event?
It's so tough because I'm not familiar with some of these names because, like you said, it's an Ultimate Fighter finale. And I did not watch 1 second. I'm familiar with one of the fighters just from before, from her career prior to the UFC, and she's not on this card. So,
well, you're probably familiar with the brother of one of these fighters, Muhammad Usman.
I sure am. Now that I know that it's his brother, I just didn't know if it was somebody who had the same last name.
That's his younger, bigger brother.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a little bit of a moment of intrigue.
Okay.
But, I think the co-main event, I'm more excited for that than I am the main event. Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal. Get out of here, man. That's amazing. I would give that one a 3.5 or a 4.
That'll be a fun one. Yeah, absolutely.
That fight alone. But as a whole, I mean, there's a few fights on here I'm excited for. I think Augusto Sakai versus Sergey Spivak could be fun.
I'm never excited for a heavyweight fight like that. It's just, no.
I'm excited for this maybe to be Sam Alvey's last fight ever. I love that he's still going. What is this, a 27-fight winless streak now?
I believe it's 7 or 8. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I don't want to say I'm rooting against the guy, but I mean, realistically, the amount of chances he's got compared to some other fighters is kind of what's galling.
Honestly,
not so much that he's getting the chances, but that no one else is.
Mikhail Oleksiejczuk should demolish Sam Alvey in this fight, but you never know. It's
I bet you it's a split decision win for Oleksiejczuk, and I only say that because we've seen a lot of Sam Alvey losing these fights, and they end up being these decisions and things, right?
Here's what I hope happens.
He's not just getting knocked out left and right. He's definitely losing some of them, but no.
Here's what I hope happens. I hope Sam Alvey wins this fight, and then the UFC signs him to an 8-fight contract.
I don't think that will quite happen, but
I'm always excited for Terrence McKinney to fight.
Yes, this is the one that I'm always interested in his fights. I think he's really going places too. Ariane Lipski, the Violence Queen, I'm always interested in, and I think her against Priscilla Cachoeira is going to be a really fun fight. So there's things to like here. There's a lot that I just don't like. I think I'm gonna go for a 2.5. Out of this one, and it's buoyed heavily by guys like McKinney and by Luque Neal. That's kind of where I'm sitting.
I was thinking 3 for my overall card as well. I was honestly thinking of going up to 3.5 just because I'm intrigued to see what this season of The Ultimate Fighter has produced, and I just want to see. All right, these are. I mean, I don't care about. I used to be really into The Ultimate Fighter, and I've fallen off over the past 10 seasons. I don't think I've watched it. Maybe I watched one of the most.
It's been on for 17 years with a little bit of a break in there.
Yeah, but
I'm tired.
I used to be super into The Ultimate Fighter, and it has produced some good fighters. So I'm all I want to say is I want to see what the best of these two divisions of these seasons can bring out, especially now that I know that that's Kamaru's brother. Yeah, why not? I'll give it a 3, but I was debating giving it a 3.5 just because I'm curious to see who rose to the top in this season without having seen a single second of this season.
I'm actually probably I'm at a 2.5, and I'm probably closer to the 2, but I will stick with 3 again. And it's heavily buoyed by those kind of those 2 fights that I mentioned, the Luque Neal fight and Terrence McKinney. And I don't even really like the Terrence McKinney booking here. I don't think this was a fair matchup to throw Eric Gonzalez in there at this stage of his career. It almost feels like a being thrown to the wolves kind of situation, and the odds seem to reflect that I'm not alone in feeling that way. Yeah, we've seen upsets all the time, but yeah, this definitely seems like a showcase for T-Rex here. Which, hey, fine, okay, whatever. But it's just not the most attractive card on the whole. And I would say probably the one fight you can't miss that I would pick is most definitely the Luque Neal fight, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this on the whole, this is a card that if I was, let's say, a more casual fan instead of a media member who covers the sport, I would probably say to myself, well, what time does the main card start? And then I'll tune in about an hour and a half later, and I can just watch those last couple fights. That's where I would sit.
One more. I think that Takashi Sato versus Brian Battle could be fun.
Sure. Look, all of these fights have potential to be fun, but on the whole, is it the most interesting? I don't know. It just feels like it's fleshed out with a bunch of not undercard talent. I don't know what that means, but let's say guys and gals that need fights.
Yeah. But again, the main event has extremely high potential, as does the co-main event, and that's why I think that I'm going to land on a 3 here.
All right, well, we do have, it's not the only MMA coming up this weekend, because that's Saturday, but on Friday, in my neck of the woods, sir, PFL is coming to Madison Square Garden's Hulu Theater.
First time had me in the first half, not going to lie. Madison Square Garden, Hulu Theater.
I know. It's just the smaller venue. It's the more intimate venue. I know.
It's just funny because they can just be like, "Hey, it's at Madison Square Garden's Hulu Theater."
Well, that's how that's how the cachet that comes along with it. But honestly, if you've watched fights there, it is a kind of decent place to watch, just because there's you're never sitting too far away from the action at this venue. I've watched Glory Kickboxing there. I've watched PFL there. Actually, I've seen some good stuff there.
So are you going to be in attendance here?
Yes, I will.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to it. It feels kind of crazy if I can't get to the events in New York City working for the New York Post, right? It's kind of a weird thing though when we get to the playoff stage of PFL, because there's obviously the card is full of a ton of fights, and a lot of them have some sort of meeting in the sense that they're trying to figure out who's maybe going to be part of their next seasons next seasons of PFL. But really, we're only talking about 4 fights that really matter, because it's 2 divisions having their semifinals here: lightweight and light heavyweight. I think the one that's easily the most attractive for everybody else is at lightweight, with Anthony Pettis going against Stevie Ray, who actually surprised him and tapped him out with this like modified twister kind of deal in June. So it's kind of funny that it worked out that the playoff standings paired them together. It wasn't necessarily match made. It was match made by virtue of how the points shook out. So that was kind of neat that we ended up with this fight with some intrigue to it. And that's very rare at the PFL. Yeah.
And I have not followed very much of the PFL this season. I feel like it's kind of like I don't really pay attention to the PFL all that much until we reach the playoffs. Because then it's like, all right, let's see how this plays out.
Now we've gotten the weed from the chaff, right? We've separated kind of in theory, the lesser talent from the guys who have a chance to win, guys and gals who have a chance to win $1 million.
Yeah, and I used to tune in for all the Kayla Harrison fights, but now I don't even do that, because I'm just like, we pretty much know how this is going to go.
Yeah. And if she doesn't maul her, then it's probably just going to be disappointing.
Yeah, it's just I remember telling my dad, like, oh, watch Kayla Harrison. She's on ESPN right now. Like, this is going to be a dominant win. It's probably going to take her out within a round. And then it was just a boring, drawn-out fight. It was her last fight.
Yeah. But no, that's, I think, the most interesting fight there, Pettis and Ray. There is some real intrigue there. But, people who've watched UFC for many years, they would remember OAM, Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He's going against Alex Martinez, who I'm pretty sure most people would agree with me here that Clay Collard really ought to have gotten the decision victory over Alex Martinez, and kind of cost him a chance to get into the playoffs. And that was a really, really unfortunate situation. Clay Collard is realistically, he might be the best of these 4 fighters, but we won't know it, unfortunately.
The playoff system, heavyweight, the standing system in the PFL has always been a little weird, because it's not like other sports where there's a large enough sample size to be like, all right, well, this team is, 162 in the MLB season. So like they're a pretty damn good team. They belong in the playoffs. It's like, no, how many fights do they get? 2, 3?
They only get 2.
2 fights. So all it takes is one weird decision like we got with Clay Collard, and you're not in the playoffs, which is so wild.
Yeah. There's a little too much flukiness. That's it. You want flukiness, that's flukiness, because you can have that kind of thing happen. And unfortunately, because PFL tends to go to places that often use regional judges only, we are more likely to see, I hate using this word except when it's deserved, robberies. And we've had robberies 2 years in a row. This is the first one that actually cost someone the chance to go on for $1 million. And that is unfortunate. But at least in New York, I do know for a fact that there are going to be some really solid judges, experienced judges there. I'm not expecting the same level of shenanigans, I guess, when they get to New York. But the real unfortunate part, this is the real disappointing part. Antonio Carlos Jr. was supposed to be part of the light heavyweight playoffs, but he suffered an injury, I believe, in training. It sounded like a torn ACL, if I recall.
Oof.
And he is not in anymore. He had won last year. He looked like he was probably on track to be the favorite again. He was going to fight a teammate in Omari Akhmedov, which wouldn't have been fun for him, but unfortunately, that's just the way it works out. They would have put professionalism, put professionalism up front and do what they needed to do to try and win the money. Now, sure. I mean, I have to think Akhmedov is actually probably has a high chance to be able to win this. But the funny thing is, and this isn't really funny either, but the man who Akhmedov faced when he got into the PFL last year, he died. So we don't. He was able to get into this tournament in such a very strange circumstance as well. So he's kind of had.
Wait. We just glanced over that. I did not hear about this.
Yeah, Jordan Young, unfortunately, passed away. I believe there was an accident of some sort.
Jeez.
I don't want to.
That's awful. When was this?
Going for me in a moment, but I will look this up. This was back in the fall. Death ruled accidental overdose. Fentanyl.
Oh God, that's terrible.
Yeah, so it was a real terrible situation there. Young guy in the sport. He had a really impressive. It was a nice knockout actually of Akhmedov, and unfortunately he is gone. So this is two times in which Akhmedov has through no control of his own benefited from the misfortune of others. So he is here now, and look, he's got chops. He's fighting in 205. He hits hard, so in theory he could still win this.
You got to think that. Obviously the PFL would have loved to have Shoeface back in this tournament.
Yeah,
but definitely. Just from an optics perspective of this card, zeroed in into a vacuum, having 4 of the 6 fighters in the top 3 fights be former UFC names. You'd have Anthony Pettis, you'd have Shoeface, you'd have Omari Akhmedov, and you'd have OAM, all in the
Rob
top.
Wilkinson also was with the UFC.
Oh, I completely forgot about that.
He's going against Dylan Monte, a young guy.
So it would have been 4 of the 8, or 5 of the 8 of the top 4 fights would have been former UFC talent. Some of which one of which was a former champion, and other ones were former names in the UFC. Sure. Shoeface was a pretty popular fighter in the UFC. OAM had a following. Omari Akhmedov had some fans and had some potential in there, but
had some weird fights in there too.
Some weird fights,
in particular against Chris Weidman was kind of that was a wacky, sloppy fight.
But at the same time, that would have been huge for them. I mean, it's still 4 former UFC fighters, one of which is a former champion, and it would have been nice to have Shoeface in there against Akhmedov, even as their teammates.
Sure. But yeah, if nothing else, there's no denying that there are some legitimate stakes in the playoffs of the PFL. So I think that's where PFL actually starts to become pretty interesting is these guys who are, let's face it, they're not top ranked UFC talent, even Pettis anymore. I don't think anyone would put Pettis in the top 15 of the UFC at either 170 or 55 at this stage of his career. But it's a second chance for them to get something, or a first chance for them to establish their names, and any chance to win $1 million in MMA is very rare. So it is interesting, but man, we're kind of running low on time here, sir. I want to get over to games. I like talking about games, and I haven't done it for a while. So let's get on this, my friend.
Yeah, what are you playing these days?
I had a little bit of time, even with all my traveling, all my work and stuff like that, to play a few different games, more diversity than normal. I finally got through all the tutorials of Deathloop. I'm now in the stretch run of what the game is really about, and I don't want to go deep into that. But
you're in the titular Deathloop.
I am in the actual Deathloop now. Yes, absolutely, and I'm very excited to engage with it. That's going to keep me busy in so much as I have any time to not cover fights. I'll be playing Deathloop now, I think. But I did find some time when I was traveling. I brought my Switch along. I played Super Mario 3D World some more. I'm still trying to clear that through before I get to Bowser's Fury, which I'm very excited to try, and I understand is a different experience. Yeah. And then I played Hot Wheels Unleashed for my kids.
How is that? I played it for preview long ago. By long ago, I mean I think around this time last year.
That's a long time. I mean, in in terms of the world,
or maybe a year and a half ago. I don't know. But with Hot Wheels Unleashed, I remember it was a lot of fun. The driving mechanics were sound. I mean, not all the options were in the game when I was playing it because it was a preview build.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember the AI was just ruthless. Had they tuned that down at all?
I didn't get the sense that the AI was going crazy on me.
Okay,
although I really didn't play. I only played a couple races for my kids, to be fair. But I'll say this: it's actually pretty fun. Independent of the fact that it's almost like it's a kid's game, but it's not. And it's also heavily loaded with kind of the loot box mechanic in there, which I don't really love exposing my children to. It's not my favorite thing. But at least I'm the one playing it. I don't know. I don't want them to get that dopamine hit from that kind of thing yet, because it's something that kind of I'm a little uncomfortable with. So I'm kind of reconciling how much I really want to play with them about that now. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean thankfully, I think a lot of developers are moving away from the loot box formula. Like, it was loot boxes for Fortnite early on, and they changed it to a battle pass situation.
Right.
Halo 5, I think, had loot boxes, and then they moved away from that in favor of a battle pass in Halo Infinite. And now Overwatch 2 is also removing loot boxes in favor of that same formula. So it's ultimately a thing that I think a lot of developers are recognizing that gamers don't like and parents don't like for their children. So
yeah, I'm hopeful that as my kids continue to grow, because they're still not really playing games like this yet, but at the same time, I hope by then maybe we've moved away more or less completely from the idea of teaching them that, hey, we should be gambling all the time. It's not my favorite as a parent. So
that's a solid collection of games you're playing.
It is, yeah. And again, super excited for Deathloop. But what about you? What are you playing, Mr. Games?
So I have been devoting a ton of time to a review game that I cannot talk about yet, but
you and your little dog can't talk about it.
I'll be able to talk about it next week.
Okay.
Because I believe embargo is this Friday. So I will be able to talk about it next week.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you think of God of War.
Yeah, I wish. But one thing I can talk about that I've been playing is Live Alive, which is a remake of a 1994 RPG from Square Enix that never came to the West. So it was Japan only. And they announced it earlier this year. Hey, this game is coming. We're remaking it, and it's going to come to the US market for the first time ever. It's a Switch exclusive. It was a Super Nintendo game back in the day, and it is a lot of fun.
It's Live Alive, not Live Alive?
Live Alive, yeah.
Right.
And it's basically like these different stories told in different eras through different characters. So like there's these kind of small bite-sized stories. Like the one that I'm playing through right now is prehistory. And like you're a caveman, and humans haven't invented language yet, so all the like dialogue is like pantomimed out and like told through a bunch of grunts.
Okay, sure.
And
that's how I talk sometimes.
And then there's a Wild West scenario where and then there's a modern scenario. There's a distant future, a near future, and like they all have vastly different settings. There's a feudal Japan setting where you're a ninja, and they all have vastly different settings, vastly different characters with different move sets and abilities. And I haven't gotten to the end yet, but I'm told that there is a reason that you're playing these different stories, and it's going to come together at some point of like, hey, this is why we told all these seemingly disparate stories together, and it's going to reveal itself as why like these characters were important in the overarching story. And like, you just have no idea. You're in the dark throughout most of the game. So I'm enjoying it. It's like turn-based tactical combat, kind of like where you get into these battles and it's a grid. So you can go around and like move your party around, and then like based on what attack you're doing, they have a different area of effectiveness, and you can target people within that area. And so right now I'm fighting like animals and dinosaurs in the caveman scenario.
Nice.
So it's
which is not historically accurate, but we'll go with it.
No, Jesus rode dinosaurs.
Oh, I'm sorry, mistake.
Yeah. So it was it's a fun game. I'm enjoying it a lot, and I recommend it if people like kind of turn-based classic RPGs from like the mid-90s.
And there are fans of those, absolutely.
And they remade it with the absolutely gorgeous HD 2D visuals that they've done for games like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy.
I like Octopath, yeah. I didn't play it as deep as I wanted, though.
but the visuals are just undeniably beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique. It's like 2D kind of sprite based graphics, but at the same time, like very stylized and like done in a way that only modern consoles would. You would never have seen a game that looks like this on an SNES, despite obviously being of kind of the DNA of those SNES style pixel art graphics.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not one that I'm going to seek out, but I hope that anybody who is a fan of these RPGs, kind of these classic style, I hope people will take your recommendation, sir, and run with it. But we do have some other kind of old school game news in a sense that's getting new, right? We talk about this particular property a lot on the show.
So it may surprise you, Scott, but we're going to talk about Ninja Turtles and a video game starring the Ninja Turtles.
Always.
This time, not Shredder's Revenge, though, which is one that we've always talked about. This time, it's the Cowabunga Collection, which features the 13 classic games, 4 of which have online functionality. So it's the 89 arcade game, the Turtles in Time arcade game, which I'm presuming is because they want you to be able to play 4-player instead of just 2-player. Otherwise, why not do the SNES version? And Hyperstone Heist, and then, which is fine that we have that in online, because that kind of makes up for having the SNES version not be the online version. But then we have SNES Tournament Fighters. So
I'm a little disappointed that I can't play Manhattan Project online with my buddies.
I'm fine without that. It's a fun game, but I'm fine without that one. But
I mean, I'm not.
It's always better to have more in terms of the options. But if they only could do 4 games, say that was like their limit, the scope of their development, I think those are 4 solid picks.
Yeah, I guess if I have to agree.
I mean, would I have loved to have Manhattan Project? That'd probably be my next pick after the SNES Turtles in Time.
Mm-hmm.
But we already have Turtles in Time arcade, and we have Hyperstone Heist, which is just basically the Genesis version of Turtles in Time with some different twists and turns.
I will say, at the very least, being a PlayStation user, I can do share play, and I can say, okay, someone can play local Manhattan Project with me. They don't even need to own the game. We can play it, hour increments in time, and then just reset. It works out.
There you go.
So, I can find my workarounds.
Why are we bringing this up, Scott? That's because we finally got a release date, and it's this month.
Yes,
August 30th.
All the way at the end of the month.
All the way at the end of the month, but it's a collection that we're both looking forward to, and it's one that isn't too far off.
Yes, that one will be added to my collection. I don't know if I'll do it right away. I may have to wait until there's like a decent sale or something like that.
Oh, wow.
I expect that will go on sale, but
damn, man, I'm surprised.
You know what it is? It's the simple fact that I can still play Shredder's Revenge anytime I want to.
That fair.
Makes it a little bit easier. I mean, look, if one of my buddies says, "Hey, I got it, let's play online," I'll be like, "All right, fine, I'll buy it." But if there's no impetus otherwise, I can wait. I have patience. I have restraint.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a day one for me, just because I loved Shredder's Revenge so much that I'm just like, I want more Turtles stuff, even if it's stuff I've already played. And also, I'm actually really looking forward to coming at the NES TMNT game with fresh eyes.
By the way, did you beat Shredder's Revenge yet? Because for a while you hadn't.
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank God. Okay. Let's say I've probably beaten that thing a good 15 times now.
Jesus.
I love it. I beat it last week. I didn't even mention it as games I played, but I did beat it with a buddy who hadn't played it. My good pal in Florida, who I used to play video games with when he was living up here as a kid and everything. He was one of the impetuses for me getting big into video games, to be frank, especially Mega Man. But we played that together. We played a whole run through, and that was a good time. But yeah, I mean, there's some other gaming news. I mean, this was kind of a big news for it, but we're getting really tight on time, my friend.
Yeah, so we'll just do this one then, and then wrap up. But Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, just an incredible game. The best Mario Kart game, I will say, pretty definitively. I know there's people who are like, oh, what about Double Dash? What about N64? N64 I love the N64 version just because it was the game that I grew up on. I mean, Super Mario Kart and N64 were the two that I played the most as a kid.
This is a better game. It just is a better
Mario
game.
Kart 8 Deluxe is just unbelievable selection of tracks, unbelievable selection of characters, and the best
including
mechanics.
A lot of those ones from N64.
So they announced earlier this year there were going to be 48 new tracks coming to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe by way of DLC. The first ones came in March, and that brought 8 new tracks, and we're just going to get, I think, 6 waves of 8. That's math, right? For 48.
Yeah.
So
Correct
that's math.
even.
Yeah, that's math. So 48 tracks coming by the end of 2023. There were already 48 tracks in the game, so this is doubling the number of Mario Kart courses if you buy this expansion or if you have the Switch Online expansion pack subscription. They announced what the next wave is. Wave 2, it's coming this month, I think this week actually, and we got 2 new cups coming. We have the Turnip Cup and the Propeller Cup. So each one of those has 4 courses, 7 of which are classic tracks, which I am shocked that there's a new one. I thought these were only going to be retro remakes, but we were getting an all-new course. So let's run down this. Turnip Cup has from the mobile game Mario Kart Tour, New York Minute, from SNES, Mario Circuit 3, from N64, Calamari Desert, which I am so psyched for. That's the one with the train that goes around.
Yep.
I am stoked for that.
I can't wait to race that one with my kids because they're going to love that there's a train, period.
God, that was one of my favorites on the N64, so I'm psyched for that. And then the DS version, Waluigi Pinball, which I know is one that people have a lot of affection for. I actually don't think I ever played the DS version.
I never played the games
of Mario Kart.
The only Mario Kart games I had played were, the original Super Mario Kart. I played N64, and I did play a little bit of Double Dash before I played Mario Kart 8.
Okay. So, yeah, the DS, I'm not a huge handheld guy, so I played a little bit of the Mario Kart 7, which was on 3DS. But other than that, I did not play a whole lot of the mobile Mario Karts. Then that brings us to the Propeller Cup, which is another Mario Kart Tour, Sydney Sprint, from Game Boy Advance, Snowland, from Wii, Mushroom Gorge, and then an all-new level called Sky High Sunday, which also I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, well, these are just like a lot of courses from Mario Kart Tour, which is the mobile game. And at first, that doesn't sound very exciting because a lot of people don't like the mobile game. However, bringing these courses, which are some of the more intricate levels in the Mario Kart franchise, to a better game in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I think is a huge win. And if you look at that first wave of courses, the 2 best courses on that were from Mario Kart Tour, because you're like, oh, wow, this actually feels really good to play with the Mario Kart 8 controls and like the physics of that game. So I'm excited for more of these Mario Kart Tour levels to come to the superior console game. And I think that this seems like a great selection of titles or of levels from past games. I'm a big SNES and N64 player, as I said before. So I'm excited for Mario Circuit 3 and Calamari Desert to join my Mario Kart 8 Deluxe collection of tracks.
See, I don't have the expansion pass right now for Nintendo Switch. So for me, I really want to play these tracks, but I also kind of am like, man, I think I can wait until, like, let's say all of them come out, and then I can get my subscription maybe for a year and then just go nuts on it. Because I want everything at one time. I don't want to wait around.
Well, I mean, this was 16 courses are available starting on August 4th.
There's 48 coming, sir.
Math.
Then
you're going to have to wait till the end of 2023.
I've got patience.
The world might not even be around by the end of 2023, Scott.
Well, then, unfortunately, I will have to have survived on just hanging out with my kids and doing stuff like that.
Make sure your Switch is charged before all the electricity goes out.
The only thing I wanted to point out, too, because, again, we ran out of time, but I do think we have just a quick bit of time here. I'm disappointed about this news that Knights of the Old Republic Star Wars remake has been reportedly put on hold. I don't like to see that news, sir.
Yeah, it's always a bummer, but I mean, I'd rather them put it on hold than either work their workers to death and make them crunch indefinitely, or
Absolutely.
put out an inferior project.
I'm so in line with you on that, but I'm still disappointed.
Oh, of course.
I think I'm okay to feel both.
Absolutely.
We can be both as adults, right? We can both be disappointed, but also be happy for the developers who hopefully get to live their life a little less victimized,
exploited, stressed.
Yeah, exploited. There you go.
Yeah. I agree. I've heard horror stories from developers of having to sleep under their desks, like basically have like a temporary bed set up underneath their desk where like that no video game is worth that.
No, nobody should do that so that I can play a game that I've already played before. That's just...
You're right. Only new games.
It's exactly. Only for new games. No. Seriously, please don't. I'm never a fan of that.
Developers should absolutely have lives outside of their work.
And we do too, and so do our listeners. So I think we can wrap up here. That is the show. If you liked it, make sure you subscribe. Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We're everywhere. And while you're at it, would you kindly follow our social handles at Brian P. Shea and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram.
And, of course, if you want to reach us with questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear more about, or just letting us know what you're hyped about in a more formal capacity, you can hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.